Welcome to the talk show where men unite, having conversations that inspire, ignite. From relationships to wellness, we cover it all. In this positive space, we're standing tall. We're the men of the talk show, spreading good vibes.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Men's Talk Show, Season 3, Episode 10. So, as usual, Wayne and Ron are here, bringing another special guest to share their thoughts on men's mental health and emotions. And so, I want to introduce Isaac Wathen. He resides in San Diego, California, and he's a one-on-one love and relationship coach. And what he does is he works with men to break down the stigma and give space for men to be vulnerable and understand their emotions. And he also does this within, group coaching as well as men's retreats as well in the San Diego area. And so without further ado, Isaac, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for what you do, and looking forward to hearing all the many ways that you support men around this topic about being vulnerable and sharing their emotions and things like that. So, I just want to ask, what made you want to get into this space?
Yeah, so my journey into the space was a personal journey first, and it starts with my story. And, I used to believe what a lot of men believe is that my job as a man was to act like I had it all together all the time, even if it crushed me from the inside out, right? I think a lot of us were raised on similar things that, our worth is measured by how quietly we can bear our burden, by how much we can neglect ourselves to serve others, and how deeply we can deplete ourselves in the name of being the provider. So strength to me years ago meant muting my feelings and numbing my pain, and love meant self-sacrifice. And, if I could do all that without asking for help, that was even better. So,
Yeah,
control.
and
Yeah.
I want to say, so growing up, did you see that from your father or father figures that were in your life?
I think I saw it from coaches. I think I saw it from my father. I have a great relationship with my dad, but I think, there were some painful things growing up that he just handled on his own, that he bore really quietly in my home. Even with my mother, emotions were in the house, but emotions weren't ever named, right? The emotional expression wasn't abusive, but it was often loud and scary for me as a child. It was unregulated, it was volatile, and there was always, I won't say always, but often a hum of tension in the air that was there because emotions weren't being talked about. There's a lot of stuff shoved underneath the rug, and that created a home environment that didn't feel peaceful to me as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of times in my own childhood where, I could tell like there was something with my dad that it's just something wasn't right. Like I said, that tense in the air, but like not to speak about it, not to ask those questions because that's not your space as a child. So when did you get to a point in your life where you realized that, something needed to change?
Yeah. Um, so what I also learned about being a man is that, you just follow the script, right? And for me, the script that I was shown was go to college, get a good job, find a nice woman, and start building a life together, right? And I followed that to the T, and I got to a place where I was teaching yoga at the time, and I was driving my car downtown to teach yoga. And I'll share more about what's going on in my life at the time, but there was a moment where the freeway curved, and for just a split second I thought, what if I don't turn the wheel? What if I just let go? Because I didn't want to die, but I didn't see any other way out of living a life that wasn't mine. At that time in my life, I was experiencing sexual dysfunction. I was engaged to a woman who I was realizing wasn't the person for me, right? And I didn't talk to anybody about it, right? I didn't talk, right? I had erectile dysfunction, right? And we can talk about what contributed to that. So I wasn't able to have sex with the woman that I was engaged to. And the whole time I'm convincing myself that everything was fine. I'm not going to the doctor. I'm trying to figure everything out by myself. I'm not telling any of my friends or family that I think I need to break off my engagement. And I'm really just getting further down this path of abandoning myself to preserve an image, right? To keep up this masculine performance. Because I was so scared to tear it all down, to come out and say, I made this massive bet, ring on this woman's finger, and I'm going to come out to all my friends and family and say I was wrong. And I I didn't know how I was going to do that. I had no skill of vulnerability or relational communication. And so that moment of, wow, I just thought about crashing my car up the side of the freeway. That's when I knew that something needed to change.
And you can see based on your story how much was bearing on your shoulders. All these different things just pile up, and it's like it's not just one thing; it's another one, and then another one, and then another one. And trying to maintain that stoic, I got everything covered. I can hear you when you say like, you have a problem, a health problem, and you're trying to figure it out on your own, right? And you're like Googling things and,
Mhm.
just trying to do your own research, become a scientist for yourself, when really like just asking the question from somebody would
Yeah.
be beneficial, but that's not what we're raised to do. And that just all adds to that weight. And I can Sarah, I've been at that point too where you're driving and it's like, what if I just don't turn the wheel? And it's a really eye-opening moment when you can reflect on that and say, wow, like this where I'm at right now. So, you know, after that, what was your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, so with the erectile dysfunction, it's for a while I thought it was just biology, I thought it was blood flow or hormones, but it started to feel like there was something bigger at play. Like there was almost a spiritual root to it. Like there was something else that wasn't working too. Like my body was starting to reject this version of masculinity that I'd been living. It's like very rigid and disconnected. And it felt like it wasn't just that I couldn't get hard, it was that I was done hardening myself against the truth. And so after a year of trying to lone wolf, hyper masculine, solve this thing on my own, I saw a doctor. And this first doctor looked at me and said, "It's all in your head." But something in me knew that, like, no, it's not. So I listened for the first time in a long time, not to shame, not to the doubt, not to this doctor, but to this whisper that so many of us men are disconnected from. And I saw a naturopath, so someone who would listen not just to the data, but to my
Yeah.
intuition, not because it made sense, not because I was trying to make everything logical like I had for years, but because it felt right. And that's when we found it. We found a tumor. It was near my third eye. It's kind of a physical metaphor of the intuition I've been denying. And so my body had been talking to me through symptoms, and that tumor and the resulting ED, they weren't a malfunction. I know now they were a mirror, because it wasn't just my erection that was weak. It was this performative version of masculinity that I'd been living. And so that was the start
Wow.
of me, not just making logic my only authority, but learning to trust my intuition and my soul and my emotions.
So
Absolutely.
when you said they found a tumor, did you
Mhm.
is was it cancerous?
No, it was benign. So it's called a prolactinoma, and it was sitting on my pituitary gland. And so what was happening is it was the pituitary gland produces hormones. That
Yeah.
that tumor sitting on it was messing up the production of hormones. It was causing my testosterone to dive, a hormone called prolactin to go way, way up. And that's what was contributing to the erectile dysfunction.
Got it. And that is a huge statement as to why, for me personally, I believe that if we stop treating the symptoms, right? Modern medicine nowadays is particularly all about treating the symptom. Oh, you have a headache. Okay, here, just take some Tylenol. Or you have this, just do this, or just eat better. But, seeing a naturopath or, somebody who will look at the holistic of your whole body and figure out what is really going on. And that's what really saved your life right there. If you just would have took medication, for erectile dysfunction or something like
Yeah.
that, you know, you would have never caught that. And it would have become a massive problem later on. So I'm very glad that you listened to your intuition. I hope more guys listen to that and hear what you're saying. Like, just don't treat the symptoms. Go to the root cause of the problem. For anything, professional life, personal life. If you go to the root cause of the problem, that helps, tenfold.
Yeah, our bodies possess so much intelligence. It's like our intelligence doesn't just live in our brain, it lives in our gut and our bodies, and even the things that are unpleasant, right? These symptoms, I believe that they're pointing to something. Like our bodies are not fighting us, right? When we get colds, it's actually our body is healing. It's not pleasant
Yeah.
for us, but our body is healing us. And so if we can understand the body as an ally and get a little bit curious about, what might this headache be pointing to, or what might this back pain be pointing to, and we can, you know more about ourselves and the body. Like working with the body is a lot of what I do in my coaching, actually.
So I wanted to ask you now, how did
Yeah.
that affect your relationship with your wife when you can, the erectile dysfunction? How did that affect your relationship with her?
Yeah, so we were never married. She was my fiance, right? So it was really, really hard, and I didn't even fully let her in on how much shame I felt about not being able to perform as a man. It's just one aspect of being a man, but like symbolically, it is not symbolically, biologically, it is what makes us a man. And that's like a job that we feel like we need to do to feel like a man. And so, not being able to connect with her in that way, um, really created a lot of distance between us. Not that she wasn't great and supportive through the time. I think it was more that I didn't really let her in. She didn't know that it was as big of a drag on my mental and emotional health as it was, because I didn't tell her. Like I didn't even tell the person closest to me.
Yeah. And so after that, like that whole scenario, you found the tumor, you got it
Mhm.
taken care of. What happens then after that?
Yeah. So from that moment when I listened to that whisper that something was right, and that was confirmed with the discovery of the tumor, I realized that I had been hyper rational, overly logical my whole life. And so I stopped making the logic my only authority, and I formed like a new internal board of directors. And I said, brought my body to the table and my emotions and my soul. And that was actually really hard because that new board of directors didn't care at all about appearances. It didn't care about pleasing people. It didn't care about my 5-year plan. And so it asked me to follow another feeling that I've been fighting with every fiber of my being. Um, but I knew it was true, and I knew that it would destroy the life that we built together. So I broke off my engagement. Um, I betrayed her because I couldn't betray myself any longer. And that wasn't like a moment of triumph. It was
Yeah.
really painful. And the moment I said those words, I can't do this anymore, the floodgates like opened, and years of repressed emotion. I hadn't cried in over a decade, but I just started, my whole body just started sobbing. And that was just really the beginning of me coming home to myself.
Yeah. And that was such a monumental moment. And like you said, it's not one that was like cheerful and joyous where you're like, yeah, I did it. It's like, no, just come to the realization that you've been suppressing these emotions for so long. And now it's a relief, a somber relief, but bittersweet at the same time because now you have that space to be vulnerable with yourself and know like this is what my body needs more of is to be vulnerable with myself and let my emotions be free.
Yeah. Absolutely. And another moment that helped me see the power of vulnerability is, I was sitting outside the library in my neighborhood in my car. I still hadn't told anybody that I thought I needed to end my engagement, but it felt like I was at the crossroads where it was something that I needed to do. And I'm sitting outside the library and I was shaking and my body felt really heavy. And I knew in that moment that I needed to call somebody. And it's like, if I had had a weapon in my lap and not a phone, like who knows where that could have gone. But I didn't know who to call, but I called my dad, and I thought he was going to tell me he was disappointed in me. I thought he was going to tell me to rethink this. I called my dad, and he didn't say any of that. He just said, "That sounds really hard. I think you're really brave. And before I met your mom, something similar happened to me." And it wasn't exactly the same, but it was a long-term relationship that needed to end. And just that simple act of telling my dad what was going on and having him reflect it back to me, it felt like I came up for air. Like it felt like I could breathe for the
Yeah.
first time in months.
Yeah. And was that one of the first times you were ever vulnerable with him?
Yeah. And my I tell you what, like my relationship with my parents, my relationship with everybody has gotten so much better from that
That's good.
moment, because it's like sharing that, like I need to break off my engagement. There was no way I could emerge from that with my self-image intact. It was just like
Yeah.
everybody got to see me for me. And yeah, all my relationships got better after that. Not immediately after, but it opened the gates of vulnerability in my life.
Yeah. I'm sure some people, who didn't play an impactful role in your life probably faded out after that or couldn't accept the new you. And some of that negativity left because they weren't ready to receive that vulnerability from you. And I'm so glad to hear that, I'm sure, because I do this for me, like when you have these tough conversations coming up, you play it in your head over and over, thinking of what the person's going to say. And so having that phone call with your dad, I could just imagine what you were thinking and the lead up to that. But I'm glad that you got the outcome that you were looking for. That really helped you, uh, with all of your relationships going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a massive moment, and I had more moments like that as I told other people. I we do this thing when we don't open up. We think that our problem, like no one's suffering more than us, which is kind of a narcissistic way to look at things, right? I thought I was the only guy in the world that ended an engagement, and I was the worst guy. And then this happens, and I start meeting people who are telling me stories of their engagement that ended, and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow, I'm not the only person who's dealt with something like this."
It's amazing when we have a world of 8 billion people, right? And we see movies, we see TV shows, or we may hear of a personal story through somebody of things that happen. And particularly, we hear celebrity stories and breakups, things like that. But you always feel like because those people are not in your immediate circle, they're not really real, right? Those people are
Yeah.
they're real people, but their stories, they're not connected to mine.
Mhm.
But then, said you share with people in your circle and they're giving you the same feedback. Uh, Really makes it seem real. And because we want to seem like whole people, we don't want to seem like we're broken and we're
Mhm.
not like everybody else. And so, what is that the part where you started to say you want to help other men with their vulnerability and emotions?
Not quite. I still had a lot of internal work to do before I felt like I was ready to step into the seat of coach and guide. So from there, something that was really helpful to me is somebody invited me to a breathwork class. And the first few breathwork, it's like a 60-minute class. The teacher leads everything. There's other people there. And the first couple times I went, I just, had a physical experience. I felt good in my body. It felt really relaxed. But then once my body started to understand what I was doing, it started to become like an emotional experience. And so I would show up there every week, and that was like the only place at that time that I could actually cry and shout and let my body finally process these emotions that I'd trapped for years. And so there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of grief of how disconnected I've been from myself. There's grief about, the life I missed because I was too busy pleasing other people and performing. And so that was huge for me. And I also knew that I couldn't do this alone. So I hired my first coach, not to fix me, right? You said like I wasn't broken, but to help me reconnect with my inner truth, to see the shame that I've been trying to show as strength, help me rebuild my relationship with my inner child was huge, and recreate some of this self trust. And so day by day through that process, I started, coming back to me, coming back to my inner authority and my kingship and this new paradigm of masculinity. Um, and so that didn't make my life any easier, but it made it a lot more honest. And it's not about becoming softer. Like, this was hard. I had to walk right into the parts of me that I'd worked hardest to avoid, and really became this spiritual warrior who was willing to walk into the darkness and the shadows to find the gold. And then it finally started feeling like there was no difference between where I was and where I was meant to be. And so I finally felt like enough. And then from that place is where I started being able to serve other guys.
And I
Yeah.
want other people to hear. Sorry, Duran. I just want to say real quick that for our viewers who are watching this, I want them to hear that, this was a long process for you, right? It wasn't like I was open, vulnerable to your father, and all of a sudden, like, your life changed for the better. Like, no, you still said there were still struggles, and it didn't make things easier per se, but it made it more real, right? Until you got to a point where you kept working on yourself, consistency, dedication, to where you got to that point where, where you're supposed to be and where you're at were one and the same.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Duran, go ahead.
and I wanted to ask you, did you have like a lot of guy friends that maybe you can have support system for, or you didn't really have a lot of guy friends during that time?
Yeah, so during that time, when I was ending my engagement, I didn't feel like I had a lot of the male support around me that I wanted. Most of my friends at that time were college drinking buddies, right? Love them, but
Mhm.
not really in this space. And so after I ended my engagement, I started getting really intentional about starting relationships with guys who inspired me and who were grounded, and had this brain tumor and ended this engagement. And so I took 3 months off from the job that I was working at the time and took an unpaid leave. And one of the main things I was doing was just reaching out to guys that I knew of but didn't know, and just grabbing coffee or tea with them and sitting down and getting to know them and being open. And so I started building that brotherhood, and had, and now I'm to a
Mhm.
point today, years later, where it's like I have it. But that wasn't a fast process either. I had to be really intentional about it.
Yeah, no, and you said these were guys that you knew of, but you
Mhm.
you didn't actually personally know them. So, like, were they through your network, or like, how did you even like come about to meet these guys?
Yeah. So I've been teaching yoga for 6 years, and a lot of the best people I know are through the yoga community. So some of them are guys through that. Some of them were guys that I knew that were in San Diego that I'd seen on Instagram. Right. It's like, so I'm doing reach outs, like I'm building a business, but I'm building brotherhood. Right.
Yeah.
So that's how it went.
Wow. No, that takes a lot of guts right there to do that, right? To reach out to other guys and just say, hey, I just want to connect, because you never know the type of response you're going to get.
Totally.
But again, I hope the guys who are watching this really resonate with that, because you are very intentional about the people that you want around you, to help empower you and make you better at the same time. And I'm sure if we had those guys here on the phone, they would say, "Man, Isaac, man, he's been solid for me. He's been a foundation, and he's helped me as well."
Yeah. Yeah, the street goes both ways, right? That's really important that you have guys around you that can provide the same level of support that you can support them. Otherwise it's not a horizontal relationship. It's like somebody feels like they're doing more than the other one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about your business now, what you do with, coaching one-on-one men.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So yeah, so after, the story that I just told, the first place I started before I said this is going to be a business, is I started leading men's groups because I wanted to create a space that I felt like I didn't have when I was going through what I was going through, for guys to come in and be able to say, like, hey, here's this really hard thing that I haven't told anybody about. I'm really struggling with it. And so I started leading groups, and it was great. I felt so on purpose. I felt like this was what I was supposed to be doing. And then from the groups, guys are able to spend time with me and feel into my energy. And naturally from that, I started working with a couple guys one on one, right? So there was a guy who was struggling with a breakup. There's another guy that was, living in his van and struggling with mental health. And so I started working with them, and they were beta clients, right? So I charged them almost nothing for
Yeah.
coaching because I was just starting and I needed to know that I could do this, and I could, those guys got great results. And then one of those guys posted a testimonial on Instagram, and somebody on his network reached out to me, and we had a call. And by the end of that call, he was my first full paying client. So, and I, he paid me, and I looked at my phone and I got it, and I said, "Oh wow!" Like, I guess we're doing this. At that time, I was still working my corporate job, but I quit a few months later, and so yeah, now I work with guys one on one. It's mostly virtual, right? So I work with any guys in the U.S., and they come to me mostly through my network, right? So it's a brother or a friend of a friend or somebody I used to work with, and where we start is we start with their relationship to themselves, right? So there's three relationships that we work on. It's relationship to self, relationship to others, and relationship to the earth or to the world, right? And so we start at the micro level. If we change ourselves, we're part of the world. So we've changed the world. And do a lot of the inner work to understand what are the stories and beliefs that are running our lives that are causing us to go on autopilot into patterns that aren't actually the way that we want to show up. How do we take care of those parts of us that want to numb or avoid or react or blame? How do we care for those parts of us so they get a little less reactive, so we can actually start to choose new behaviors in familiar situations and rewire this internal dialogue that is the root of a lot of not the root, but actually it's a symptom, but which is what a lot of men know. Is it making them feel great?
Yeah. No, that's great. And so without giving away personal details, like can you share like one of the breakthrough stories, or somebody that you've worked with, just like how far they came?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the guys I was working with, when I started working with him, he was the founder of a tech startup in San Francisco. And when he came to me, he was he was burnt out, right? Working too hard. He didn't feel honored in his business, and similar to my story, it was, that was a performance, right? That was what he thought he should do, start a company, make a bunch of money. Same thing with my story. Let me perform this script that I inherited, right? And he got to a point where that started feeling misaligned, right? And that showed up in his body in physical symptoms. He started feeling anxiety. He, had a panic attack. And when those things happen, like I mentioned earlier, it's like, okay, you could hop on medication, or we could look at what's creating this anxiety in your life. And anxiety is this big umbrella that a lot of things can
Yeah.
be underneath of, like, my relationship isn't right, what I'm doing with how I'm making money doesn't actually feel good to me. And it's like, okay, so what's going on? And I don't ever tell my clients what to do. It's all a guidance to their own internal knowing. And eventually he got to a place where, working within this company wasn't right for his health. It wasn't right for his soul. So he ended up leaving that company. He did some traveling, and now he's doing work as a musician and a writer. So he like completely 180'd his life from something that was a performance of what culture, society wanted from him, to now what he wants from himself and what life wants from him, which is to be a creator and an artist. So that's that's a really incredible
That's
story.
wonderful. And I can relate to that because a few episodes ago we had a guy named Habib from Sweden, who he also like quit his job and went traveling. And so there's a theme there. Like he went traveling and really found himself. And
Mhm.
when he came back to his society, his community, he did a 180 and started focusing on himself, a new career change, and now he's much happier too. So same line with this guy here now, saying now he's a musician and doing what he really truly loved to do. And in life, we all need to make money to live, right? And have some type of lifestyle that's happy. But at the same time, if you can make money while doing the thing that makes you happiest, that's the best. So I'm sure that guy is like, always thinking of you, the way you helped him on that path to his true happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the sweet spot is how can we marry our passions with making money? Because, that's not the idealized perfect situation that we all trade our time for money, but that's the world that we live in now. And the best that we
Yeah,
can do is that the way that we make money is providing a service and impact to others, which, music absolutely does.
Yeah. And
yeah. And
I have one final question though before we go here, and I haven't forgot about what you're gonna say too, Wayne. I wanted to know if men wanting to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so the best way to reach out to me is send me a DM on Instagram. It's just my first and last name separated by period. So Isaac.Wathen. You can find me on Instagram and send me a DM. I'd love to chat and invite you into my community groups. There's lots of ways to get involved and have support.
And we'll post all the links in the description so you don't have to worry. Wayne, did you have something to say too?
No, I was just going to end the show and just say thank you again, Isaac, for coming on. But then thank you for what you're doing in the men's mental health space. Because whether you help one man or 1,000 men, you're making a difference in the world, and I can really see your passion when you spoke about that story, how much it means to you that you help someone. So continue doing what you're doing. I'd love to connect in the future, and thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, what an honor. Thank you, Duran. Thank you, Wayne, for doing what you do. And let's keep uplifting the men.
Yeah, and I can tell you're a fully healed person to some degree now, right?
To some degree, lifelong process, but I am in a really good place.
Yeah. All
That's
right.
great.
Well, that's a wrap for today. And I'll make sure to give you the links and all that in the LinkedIn, or Facebook, whatever you want to do. So
Awesome.
that's it. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, y'all. See ya.
Thanks.